time of life to focusing on adventure photography. And I know that he's been scouting the world for places and things to photograph. So today he's going to talk to us about under and above water nature photography. Give a welcome to Arthur.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Arthur Borges. So I have been on the club, I think, since March last year. And it was really funny because after a couple of months, I joined the club. The club leadership came to me and said, "Oh, can you come and talk with us in January?" And then I started attending all the sessions for the rest of the year. And people came in and said, "Oh, I'm a master of this," or "I participate on PPA. I mentioned on this competition. I won national prizes and etc." And I'm going to tell you guys, I didn't do any of that. So I was thinking here, what can I offer to this team? And I think it's my passion for photography on different levels. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of my story and how it came through. A lot of my time doing photography, so I have been doing this for like almost 10 years now, has been dedicated to underwater. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of the story about that and how to take good underwater photos. I have an underwater photographer here, so I may look stupid on what I say, but I have been a somewhat pro in underwater photography for some time. But for the last few years, I have been dedicating to mostly, as Tom said, scouting the world for like adventure photography. And on Arthur Borges photography, I think our vision is to bring adventure back to photography. So nowadays, people go to these Instagram sites and they take the same photos on the same places and etc. And my thinking, both from a training and from a script point of view, is to exactly do the opposite. I go to the places where people don't go, and that takes sometimes a little bit of effort. In a couple of weeks, my wife and I are going to a 7 days hiking and camping trip in Patagonia, exactly to do that. So that's the whole idea. But let's talk a little bit about my underwater photography years. So probably 30 years ago, I started thinking about, okay, what do I do with my scuba diving career? So I have been scuba diving for a long time. And as part of that, pretty much we travel all over the world. I think since we started with scuba diving, that was a good reason for us to start traveling to all those amazing islands that you can think of. You see those on magazines and etc. We pretty much have been in all of them. And unfortunately, my daughter that's over there, she has been going with us since she was pretty much a baby, and now she's doing marine biology. So that's going to be my fault if she doesn't make money and have to find something else for a living. But that's the whole reason. And as we were going to all these places and Caribbean and the Pacific and Micronesia and all these different and amazing places, we start looking for more thrill. The Caribbean scuba diving thing was not enough to bring the adventure anymore from my point of view. So I started looking for more thrill. So these are some examples of the thrill we're looking for. So that's a wreck in the coast of Brazil at 200 feet. That takes 15 minutes to go down and an hour and a half to come back from that dive. That's a lead mine an hour south of St. Louis. The water starts at 150 feet down from Earth. That's a cave dive in Mexico, and that's a wreck dive 130 feet. So we start looking for the thrill that the normal things don't bring. And then I start telling my wife, look, I'm not going to do like normal scuba diving anymore. I'm going to go into technical diving. And technical diving are those folks that go into caves and go into wrecks and people die all the time, etc. And she didn't get very excited about that. So she said, look, maybe you don't go on technical diving. Maybe what you do is that you get your love for photography and you bring your love for photography to scuba diving. And then you don't have to die and I can have a husband and your daughter can have a father and everything. So that's exactly what I did. So I went into underwater photography, and these are just some examples. My specialty in underwater photography is mainly macro photography. And when you think about macro photography underwater, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges, this is probably one of the most technical genres of photography that we can think of. So some of the things that I put size comparison here is probably very small, But that's a strip that's about 6 to 7 millimeters. This is a 3 millimeters crab in Indonesia. This is a nudibranch in Indonesia that's about 10 millimeters, and that's a clownfish. But I focus on really, really, really tiny things where you have to spend pretty much sometimes I spend 60, 90 minutes underwater without moving to take one of these photos. That we're going to talk about one of those examples in a sec. So through the years, I start becoming more and more involved on underwater photography. And this is really the transition that I made to a semi-pro type of thing because I still have a job, by the way. So I can do this all the time. This is probably one of the best things that happened in my life. So one day I opened my computer and my photo is on the newsletter of Scuba Diving Magazine. So that's one of the apps is that you have when you're thinking about underwater photography is to have one of your photos posted in that kind of thing. And some examples of other things that we did. So that has been like a 20-year journey for sure in terms of where I started and where I am today. But talking about underwater photography, just to give everybody a perspective. So usually when I do my training with people and I teach underwater photography to folks, I like to focus on four main areas. I think techniques, obviously, and I'm going to talk about that. Equipment, because unfortunately the underwater photography equipment is a big thing. I was going to bring my whole equipment and I think, no, I'm not going to carry all that heavy thing. So just my underwater photography gear bag weighs about 25 pounds. Not counting all the photography stuff that I have to put inside it, plus all the super gear that I have to carry on my trip. So just to make a story funny, it's like I was going to Indonesia at one point and I was flying EVA. I don't know if anybody has fly EVA out of Intercontinental here. Someone told me they're weighting your carry-on. And I said, okay, I am doomed because they went to weigh my carry-on and my carry-on is like 25 pounds. So I came up with a fantastic idea. So I bought two exactly the same carry-ons, one with equipment and one empty. And my wife went to the airport with me. And I checked in with my empty carry-on. They weighed my carry-on. They gave me the ticket. And then I went back to my car and I replaced my bag and put the ticket on the other one. Because not only the equipment is a problem in our photography, it's very expensive equipment that I was not willing to check in by any means. So that's the interesting story. Light. Just like studio photography, underwater photography is very dependent on light, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and movement. Unfortunately, when you're underwater, things are moving, and you have to deal with it. So that's one of the challenges we have. So techniques. I like to focus on four main areas when I'm talking about underwater photography training. So usually when people start taking photos underwater, and someone probably has been snorkeling, so they know that. People start taking photos, look down. First thing that I tell people is that you have to look up. You have to go down, and you have to figure out how you look up, because that's the only way that you're going to find a clean background, and you're not going to have the fishes trying to mix up with the coral behind the fishes. And not only that, you're going to start making use of the natural light that comes from the top. The second thing, focus on the eyes. Especially on the underwater photography, everything can look fantastic. If the eyes or whatever you think are the eyes are not in focus, it's a bad photo. And sometimes with the depth of field that I'm working with, it's really, really hard to get the eyes in focus. Obviously, the new cameras are helping a lot with that, but that's always a challenge. Pay attention to your background. Just like any other photography, but in underwater photography, sometimes this is even more complicated. And composition. I tell people, underwater photography is very easy for you to do, but it's very hard for you to get a good photo. And there is no Lightroom and Photoshop that's going to help you if you don't focus on these four things that I'm talking about. I think gear. This is the scuba gear part of the equation here. That's one bag. Usually it's like a whole check-in bag is for all of that stuff that I have to carry on. This is the stuff that I carry on my carry-on bag. That's 25 25 pounds. This is how my camera gear looks like for the macro photography thing when it's set up. And this is how the wide angle thing looks up when you're underwater. This thing, when it's assembled, it's extremely heavy. Underwater is neutral because that's the whole idea. We want it to be neutral underwater, but for you to carry sometimes from your hotel room to the boat, you have to do some exercise. So that's an interesting way of going to the gym while you're on vacation. Light. I like to talk about 4 or 5 different types of light. So natural light, by the way, that's my daughter over there in a cave in Florida. So whenever you can make use of natural light, let's make use of the natural light. That's really easy for wide angle photography underwater, but it's really, really hard for you to do macro. In reality, when you're doing macro underwater, you don't want natural light because you want to have over control of what you're trying to photography. Focus light, especially in dark conditions underwater, you want to have focus light so your camera can focus more easily. Especially again, when you're talking about those tiny little bits of things that you try to photography underwater. So that's one additional thing that we have to carry. These are the strobes that we use. You can start with one strobe, but then you start incorporating shadows in your photos. So that's why most professional photographers, they use at least 2 strobes, so you can try to avoid that. And there is a whole process of how you position your strobes in the water, just like how you position your strobes in a studio environment. And that's exactly what you have to learn as you're doing on water. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you're breathing, that you're swimming, that you're not dying, that the sharks are not going to eat you, and etc. So that's always an interesting challenge as you go through. And this is one interesting piece of equipment that's called a snooze. And we use that a lot for macro photography because if you think about it, we're taking photos of very, very tiny little things underwater. And if you use the strobes, you have a lot of light around when sometimes you want to isolate a specific subject. So you use a snooze to do this kind of effect that you have over here, where you can really focus your light on that specific subject so you can have a better photo of that subject going forward. And last but not least, movement. It's always fun to be underwater and having to deal with all the movement. And sometimes you have very calm seas. Sometimes you have very, very heavy seas. And this is one of the reasons that I think my wife started scuba diving and then she stopped scuba diving because she gets seasick. And as we go to more and more interesting places, it really becomes a challenge for her. But we're going to talk about some examples of how we deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So, as I said, my wife was getting less interested on doing scuba diving trips. My daughter went to college, and then in 2019, I started thinking about, okay, how can I transition from all these beach vacations that were pretty much 100% of what we were doing to scuba dive all over the world and bring back adventure to the day-to-day of our journey in terms of scuba diving. So we start making this transition to landscape photography and adventure photography. And this is an example. This is a place in Scotland that I took this year that we had to hike and find this spot to get it. And that was the photo of the day on the Sony Alpha social media. But what I like to tell people is that for me, the perfect photographer from an adventure point of view needs to incorporate a destination. And as I said, I'm trying more and more to get out of the normal and common destinations as much as I can. It needs to incorporate conditions and it needs to incorporate execution. And I'm going to give you some examples of what I mean with all that in these 4 next photos that you guys are going to see. So this one is an interesting story. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of each one of these photos. So we were in Indonesia scuba diving, and then this local told me, oh, I know where I can find these manta rays. And it's a very hard place for us to go. It took us like almost 2 hours by boat to get to this spot to take this photo. And obviously, you don't know the conditions until you get there. So when we got there, I can tell you, I have never been in a place scuba diving where the ocean was that bad. It was like going underwater in a washing machine. I was being thrown like 100 feet there, 100 feet there, and trying to take this photo at the same time with the manta and with the sun, because that was the photo I had in my mind. I wanted the manta with the sand behind the mountain, but imagine you have all that equipment in front of you, the ocean throw you back and forth. I took over 100 photos that day, and I got one photo that was the perfect alignment that I wanted. So it was exactly 45 minutes being thrown and thinking about, I'm not going to survive this dive. 100 photos to take this photo that you guys are seeing. So that's the kind of things that sometimes you have to do in underwater photography to try to get the photo that you're looking for. This one is another example. This one was taken in Bonaire, and we were coming back from a dive, and we had like this pier on our hotel. And I noticed that these planes were coming in and poking their heads out of the coral. And I thought, oh, it's going to be super cool if I can put a focus light on the plane and get that photo. So that's the whole thing about mentalizing what you want to get, looking for the conditions, and then trying to do the execution and going to my 3 points that I was talking about. So I said, for me to get the photo that I want with the black background, I have to do a night dive on that pier to get the photo. And I wanted that night. I don't think that night we had the good conditions because the water was really rough. The next day, we came back and I told my wife, okay, you guys go to have dinner and I'm going to go under the pier to take this photo. This was a 90 minutes dive at 10 feet under the pier until one blaney was on exactly the position that I wanted to take this photo. So again, that's the kind of thing. And I was scuba diving over there at 10 feet, so pretty much you can hear what's happening above you. And my wife was knocking on the pier saying, can we have dinner? Because she was waiting for me for us to have dinner. So that was an interesting one. This one has also an interesting story. So for those of you that don't recognize this place, this is the Haleakala volcano in Maui, Hawaii. And again, that was a photo that I mentalized and thought in my mind that this is what I want to take a photo of. So as we're planning our trip to Hawaii, I look at all the alignment from a Milky Way point of view. I did all the planning on Google Earth and PhotoPills. But we had one problem. At the time we were in Hawaii, the Milky Way was only going to be in that position at 3:30 a.m. And if you guys have been, has anybody been to Haleakala volcano here? Or has? Okay. So we were staying in Lahaina. That's a 2.5 hour drive to the top of the volcano. So we woke up at midnight. We drove for 2.5 hours to get to the top of the volcano. You never know what are going to be the conditions at the top of the volcano. So we got to the volcano. Thank God the clouds were below the peak. So we drove through the clouds and I said, okay, that's not going to be a photo because everything was completely foggy. And then we got there to the peak and it was completely clear. Absolute amazing sky over there. The other problem was 25 degrees outside at that time of the day. We got to the volcano around 3 a.m. and my wife comes to me and said, look, the moon is still there. I said, wait, because I look and the moon is going to set at 3:30, exactly the time where the Milky Way is going to be aligned with the observatories. So again, thinking about what you want to do, planning and trying to execute the best way we can. So my wife was really surprised because I had planned on Google Earth exactly where I was going to park my car and exactly where I was going to put my camera to take this photo. So I got out of my car at 3:30 in the morning, the moon was setting, I put my camera on, and this is a 12 photo panorama that we took at that night. And that was even a better night, because soon after that, we had around 45 minutes before the moon was setting. and the sun was rising, and we had the opportunity to look at the sunrise at the top of the volcano. That's absolutely gorgeous if you ever have the chance to do it. But that for me is one other example of trying to make sure that you have the conditions, you execute to perfection, and that you plan in advance to get to where you want to be and visualize your footing. This last one is even more funnier because this is from my Colorado workshop. And we were planning this trip and we went to this specific spot in Colorado. And obviously I knew what time the Milky Way, I think it was like around 9 p.m. The sun set, probably like 7 p.m. I knew exactly the Milky Way. So we spent like the whole afternoon walking around and trying to find the perfect tree that was going to align with the Milky Way that night. And we found this tree. But one thing that I didn't tell my wife was that in this specific place, because I was checking for the previous 2 weeks, they had mountain lion sightings every night for the previous 2 weeks. And I was thinking as I was driving to this spot, saying, look, if I tell my wife that we're going to be in the middle of nowhere, this is about 50 miles from any civilization. So we drove our car, we parked 50 miles from any civilization, we walked to this spot, and if I tell her that we're going to do all that and people are seeing mountain lions every night, there is absolutely no way she's going to do this with me. So I'm setting up my camera, trying to figure out exactly the best time to take the photo and trying to do some light painting on the tree. And my wife the whole time saying, let's turn off the lights so we can see the sky. I said, no, let's keep the lights on. I think we're fine. And she said, well, let's turn the lights off. I said, no, it's fine. Let's keep the lights on. So we took the photo. She sat on a cactus. It was a disaster. We walked back. This is from one of the photos that I love from Arthur Photography because this is a dark spot in Colorado. And the sky was absolutely gorgeous with this bonsai tree. But when we got back to the car, I told her, look, this is what's going on. It's like they were seeing months. Oh, now I understand why you don't want to turn off the lights. Right? I said, yeah, that's exactly the reason. But again, I think all these 4 photos represent a little bit my idea of adventure photography and what I try to not only bring to people when I take them to the workshops and some of the scouting trips that we organize, but also when I'm practicing training people to take photography both underwater and above water. So, as I said, trying to find all these unknown spots through this scouting trip. So, Glenn and I were in Iceland at the same time this year, and I spent pretty much 24/7 going all around scouting different locations to try to find different spots so I could bring groups later, not to the normal spots, but to different spots. And that's what I usually try to do that in all the trips that I do. So these are some examples of what I call this Colorado Hidden Geos workshop. These are spots that I like to take people. There are not the normal spots in Colorado that are very, very photogenic, but if you look for them in Instagram and etc., you're not going to see them very often. And that's why I call them the hidden spots. They're not 100% hidden, but they are not everywhere. But you guys can see what kind of conditions we got in each one of these photos here. So talking a little bit about tools. So I am a Canon, but I'm also a Sony photographer. I'm not sure who's Canon, who is Sony. Anybody Sony here? Canon, a lot? Sony? Okay. So I do Sony above water, especially because the freedom that it gives me, especially with the A4 in terms of cropping because of the 62 megapixel. Yeah, I can do much more from that point of view. And I still use a Canon for my underwater photography thing. You guys can think about, I was talking a lot about planning photos, planning trips. These are just some examples of the things that I use in terms of when I'm planning a specific shot. And for example, in the Haleakala shot that I was telling you guys the story, I probably use all of these planning tools to get to that shot. And nowadays, I'm mostly a Lightroom and a Photoshop person, but I also use Luminar. Does anybody use Luminar here? Yeah. I like Luminar to do some things. If you follow me on social media, you're going to see some of the things I do on Luminar. And this is another hidden gem that I don't know if anybody knows about it. It's Snapseed. People are asking me, okay, what do you do when you're driving on your car, and etc.? I'm usually doing some stuff on Snapseed. So if you don't have that on your phone, that's an interesting tool for you to have. Other tool, falling in love with my drone. It's getting more and more harder to fly your drone these days, especially in the US. When I go abroad, I try to fly it. These are just 2 shots that I took from the Iceland trip. This was one that I had visualized in my mind. Glenn, did you guys go to that spot? Where the lighthouse is? This is an amazing and beautiful spot, but it's really hard for you to capture the grandiosity of the scene if you don't fly your drone. But at the same time, it's probably the windiest place in the world for you to fly a drone. And if you guys realize, my drone is very, very above water. So if something happened, I was going to lose my drone. So that was a tough flight for sure. But I absolutely love how this photo came up. And this is in the northwest of Iceland, the bridges over there. So talking a little bit about some of the other things that I think are important. Passion, adventure, fulfillment. So again, in everything that I do, and as you guys can see from my speech here, I have a lot of passion for photography, and I have even more passion for adventure photography. And what I'm trying to tell people is that sometimes enjoy the place and enjoy the moment, and then with the planning and the execution, the photo is going to come. A lot of people sometimes, and we just had this example, I was telling people about it. We just came back from Sedona because we're doing a Patagonia trip. We had to practice in some mountains. We went to Sedona for New Year's Eve. And in one of the locations we went, at 6:30 in the morning, there was a line of around 6 or 7 people to take a photo. That's one of these Instagram photos. And people went there and they took the photo and they left. Nobody sat down, or very few people were sitting down and enjoying the moment of that amazing, beautiful place that we were at that point. So think about that. They start enjoying the moment, is enjoying the place, and then the fulfillment of the photo itself is going to come from that. So some final thoughts. Underwater photography. I talk about that. This is one of the most technical genres of photography that I know. It has a lot of requirements in terms of practice and techniques. My daughter knows better than anybody else because I keep giving her a hard time about doing that. Because again, sometimes, and this is one of the interesting things about underwater photography, I set up my camera, set up my gear, and I go to my swimming pool, and I spend hours under water in my swimming pool practicing to take photos from a macro point of view. But that's the kind of things that you have to do with underwater photography. Unfortunately, you have to scuba dive. It's really hard to take good photos if you don't scuba dive, especially because for you to take good underwater photography photos, you have to forget that you are underwater so you can focus on your photography. So my wife tells a lot of people saying, look, when I see Arthur taking photos underwater, it doesn't look like he's breathing anymore because that is an environment that is so usual for me. I feel so comfortable on that I can focus on my photo. And that's again one of the reasons that I carry my gear all around the world, even though I could rent them in the place that I go, because I know where everything is on my gear. So I don't have to think about where to find anything on my gear. My mind already puts my hands where I need to be, so I don't have to worry about the scuba diving portion of the adventure. I can focus on the photography. And equipment, and it's expensive. Unfortunately, it's very, very expensive. The underwater case costs about 2 times more than the Canon camera itself that goes inside. the case, and that's just the case, without talking about all the adapters that you have to put in the case. So that's one of the challenges we have. Landscape photography. As I said, do your homework, and then the photos will come. Enjoy the moment. I think that's important. Execution is key, especially in the places that we go and the type of photography we do most of the time. We don't have a lot of time for error. And the Haleakala, as I said, we had about 30 minutes to take a photo. And you have to get there and do the job. So you have to know what you're doing. And that's just one of the challenges we have with this general photography that we do. And enjoy the moment. So that's what I want to go with you guys. These are all the spots that you can find me pretty much on all the different social medias. If you guys want to follow and take a look, we just had some of the Sedona photos, and this year we have a few trips that you guys are going to see. We're going to Patagonia in a few weeks. We're going to Asia in April. I'm going to do a scouting trip in Teton and Yellowstone for the fall, and we're going to do Norway in November. So that's pretty much the adventure we have for this year. So thanks very much, and I hope that was helpful.
Anybody have any questions for Arthur? Anything you want to ask? Anybody?
Arthur, do you have a workshop where you take people?
I do. The problem is that I still need to figure out how I can do that more often.
Okay.
So this year I'm not going to do anyone because I just don't have time to do it. But all these things are workshops that can happen in the future. So if this is the kind of thing that you're looking for, interested, follow me, and as soon as we can make those happen, we're going to make them available.
Also, how many guys does it take to be certified to dive by yourself?
Melissa, do you know?
Well, you have to do the training course, and then you need, I just believe, one official checkout dive, but it takes a little over 50 to start getting good at it.
Any other questions?
Are you going to Norway with the orca?
Maybe. Maybe. We want to try to see if we can do more Floating Islands in November. Let's see if everything works well. So that's another spot that we want to take folks in the future. So that's a scholarly trip.
When you're focused on your photography, and since I see some of your pictures are 200 feet under the surface, how do you focus on that and your time management for how much air and how long it takes to come back up so you don't get sidetracked? Oh, I'm taking this great picture, and then all of a sudden you don't have enough time to make it safely to the surface.
Yeah, I can tell you this is always a challenge. And what I do now, because we had some, if you do this for a long time, as I have been doing, there will always be scary moments. So I can tell you, I had a situation a few years back. I was doing macro photography in the Philippines, and I was so focused on my photography that I forgot about my air. That's a bad mistake. Yeah, that's a mistake you do not want to do. And when I figured out what was happening, I had to do a very quick ascent, something that's not safe at all. So what I do now, I have 2 diving computers, and I have alarms on them, so they let me know when the time comes for me to have to do something. So they tell me, okay, I'm half my tank, I have to go back, start going back to the boat. I'm on a certain level of oxygen depending on how deep I am, so I know that I have to go up. And if that doesn't work, I have the backup to help me and try to figure out that. So I don't have to worry too much about this. So that was my way of trying to avoid this scary situations I had in the past.
I think a lot of people won't realize that when you're that deep, it takes a lot longer to come up.
Oh, yeah.
To go down.
Yeah. So that one on the rack, 200 feet, there was a very interesting story. So the way you do that rack, you go down, you spend 15 minutes out there, and then you have to spend about an hour and 50 minutes going up the cable very slowly to go up. So one of the things that happen when you're scuba diving that deep there is something that's called narcosis. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about. So that's an effect that happens when you're scuba diving very deep. That's like being drunk. So people say that it's equivalent to having a martini forever every 30 feet that you go down. So at that time, 200 feet, I probably had a lot of martinis. But anyway, that's not the point of the story. So we're going through this wreck, and we have 15 minutes to be there. So you want to try to enjoy as much as you can the wreck. It's not a big wreck. It's probably the size of this room here. And the guy in front of me, he was going through the wreck and started looking up, and he wouldn't move. And I was saying, okay, gosh, the time's passing by. Start pushing him, and finally, okay, he left the wreck. We spent an hour and 15 minutes to go back up. And when we got to the boat, I asked him, what were you doing? Why were you looking at the sitting of the boat? And he turns to me and said, man, I had a really bad case of narcosis because that boat is over there for like 20 years now. And I was looking at the lights, and I was thinking, why are these lights still on? So that's the other kind of situation you have to deal with. The other interesting thing about that dive was that you have to be an hour and 15 minutes on that cable going up. And it's not that you can go up and down. You have a certain range that you can go at a certain period, and then you move to the next batch. And the week before, this whole group of divers were coming back from that dive, and tiger sharks showed up. And there's nothing you can do because you can go up, you can go down. So what the guys described to me is that everybody was just circling around and looking at the tiger shark while I was circling around, and then he left away. But that's the kind of situation that we have to deal with. So. Any other questions?
Yes. A question. You did Rex.
Yep.
Have you ever done research or history of the Bermuda Triangle with Rex?
No.
Research?
No. When I did my rec training, I was living in Virginia, and we did another interesting dive over there. I don't know if you guys know. So we have some U-boats, U-boat wrecks in the coast of the United States, mainly in North Carolina area. But there is a U-boat that was sunk in the Potomac. I don't know if anybody knows that. So, yeah, very few people know about that. So that was rescued at the end of the Second World War. They brought it to inside the Potomac River near Maryland, and then they sunk the boat as a target. And we did the scuba diving over there, but the problem is that if you have been on that place and you have seen the water, it's like scuba diving on pea soup. So I can tell you guys, I have never seen a U-boat. I've touched it because I could barely see my arm on that scuba dive. And someone may say, "Hey, why the heck would you do that? Like, why would you scuba dive in a place where you cannot see your arm and etc." And going back to like sometimes you're looking for the trail of the different things.
Were your landscape photos shot in national parks or places that are easily accessed, or the private property? Or
I do landscape photography in national parks, but I try to get out of the beaten path. So that's my whole philosophy. And again, most people stay on those places that are very common and usual and everything. And my research is, where can I go that I can get this photo that's not going to be the common place that everybody goes? But I do go to landscape national parks. Yes.
Have you ever gone out to the flower mound? I think there's
The flower gardens?
yeah, flower gardens.
Yeah. Like
Is that-
just like 13 times.
Is that any good?
Yeah, I took my wife and my daughter for the first time last year because my wife doesn't scuba dive with me anymore, so my daughter is my buddy. So we went over there, and she does coral research in University of Miami now as part of her undergrad, and she said that she has never seen brain corals like we can see now in the Texas
So
coast.
is it in pretty good shape still?
It is. It is.
It's some of the healthiest coral in the world right now because it's so deep, but it's beautiful.
So the professional that does this study, you know, is telling you.
It's probably also because when you're on the shore in Galveston, you have no idea the water is clear out there. Yeah.
And I can tell us like the Flower Garden is a salt dome that is about 100 miles south of Freeport, southwest of Freeport. And you take a boat from Freeport, you go for like 10 hours, you get there and then you scuba dive the whole weekend, etc. The corals themselves are very healthy and it's a beautiful place to scuba dive. But I can tell it's like, for me, the best dive over there is not the coral. The best dive over there is that in the afternoon of the first day, they do under the rig, oil rig dive. And that's amazing because my 13 times there, I've seen all kinds of things. I've seen manta rays, I've seen sharks, I've seen all kinds of different things under those oil rigs. And they have a joke over there. They say, when you jump in the water under the oil rig, for you to attach all your equipment, because they said that it used to be 400 feet under the oil rig, but with all the gear that people lost, it's about 200 feet now. So people are contributing to make it the dive even shallower with time. So, any more questions? Great. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Yeah.